My tea. I got some nice night bedtime tea, which I love. It's like this chamomile mint
on
blend.
you.
Makes me happy.
Oh, that's nice.
It is. It's like my favorite thing. We make sure to always have like a box. We actually just picked up the trailer because we're going camping tomorrow for the weekend up to Petaluma.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and so like always have to have a box in the trailer, have a box at home because at night, like after Ray goes to sleep in the trailer, I like to sit outside and like read a book and just have my chamomile tea and just relax, you know.
Oh, I'm loving that. That's awesome. That is awesome.
It is, man. How's your week been?
Oh, it's been good. I've been feeling really good. It's been I had a nice recharging weekend, to be honest. I was able to spend a lot of time with my brother
Cool.
and my family, which is always a lot of fun. And yeah, it was good.
That's awesome. Yeah, we had kind of the same. We were getting stuff around the house done, and then we've been having solar installed, and so we had a little snafu where we had the batteries and stuff that were installed on the outside of the house, which was fine, except for our neighbors didn't really like looking at it. So we came to an agreement and had a little change order put in, and all the stuff was moved inside our garage, which actually worked out for the best. Mostly because when we moved in, there's no drywall in that part of the garage, and there's a really terrible like old wood shelving system that we used, but we didn't like it. And they're like, look, we can just rip this down. They're like, we can just put up drywall for you and install our stuff. I'm like, yes, please. So I had loaded like this whole shelf system. They demoed the whole thing. They drywalled my entire wall and then installed stuff. I'm like, okay, that's kind of what I wanted anyway. So thanks for doing all the hard work for me.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Yeah, it ended up working out perfect. So they're supposed to turn up the solar. I think the final inspection will be early next week, and we should have solar power mid next week sometime. I'm super excited. It's gonna be fun.
Hey, I think I might have lost some audio there.
Uh-oh.
And it could just be me. But
did you lose my audio?
Yeah, I'm gonna just. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me and if I'm coming over okay, but
yeah, I can hear you. Just
yeah, I can see you, but I can't hear you right now.
Really?
And that could just be me. I'm gonna even throw in my other AirPod just to confirm.
My software is saying that it's picking me up. So I wonder if it's on your side.
Yeah, and it could be. We have two viewers that are here on the show right now, and if you want to leave a comment, we're it's always nice to see and say hello to people. But yeah, I don't know if it's just me, and it could just be that it's me.
I don't know. Yeah, if you're watching the show whoever's watching the show right now, if you
I think it's just me.
Throw in the chat and see if let us know if there's any audio problems.
I'm worried that it's just me. I'm gonna check my settings here, and I will see.
No problem. We'll give that just a minute. Sorry, everyone. Give us just a minute to get some technical things sorted out.
Hello.
I can hear you.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
Okay, I can see and I can hear you just fine now.
Oh, you can? You can?
Yeah.
You can hear me? Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
How strange. Okay. Well,
I have no idea what happened.
Whatever.
Let's do this.
Let's do this. All right.
I'm sorry. I'm sure it was my setup.
It's all good. No worries, man. No worries. We're here. We're having a good time. We got some viewers here with us. We're going to jump right into it. Let's do the transition. Let's just cut over. Let's do it. We're here. We're here. Oh, now I can't hear you.
Okay, I'm telling you, I think we're getting all like the gremlins out right now because I don't know what's going on.
You know what it is, Ryan? We've done some sort of like hot take subjects before, but like this one right here is sort of a big deal. I wonder if like the interwebs are not prepared for it, and we fell into a Gundark nest, and like there's the Legends Gundarks and the Canon, and they're just like going at it. They're like, "You're not gonna do this show." Something like that. I don't know.
Oh, hey, let's talk about Bothans. I mean, seriously, the Bothans and Legends are a lot different than Bothans and Canon, and it's funny. It's funny, man.
Who knew there were basically like friendly werewolves in Star Wars? You know,
right? Yeah, I'm telling you, I think about this all the time, like especially because I feel like there's so many things. Like I think every great. And by the way, like, thanks everybody who's joining us in. We can see that we have some viewers coming in right now. Please remember to like and subscribe. That's always important. But the thing that I always think about, and I was so excited when this topic came up, Jeff, and you came up with this topic, so I think, thank you to you, is every like major fandom has its canon and its legends, essentially, and it doesn't know how to balance either. And that's like Star Wars, Star Trek, even Lord of the Rings. Like, there's stuff like Return of the Shadow, right? The letters, for example, that Christopher Tolkien collected from his father, and it's all of this stuff that it's like, I think it's so interesting how every fandom has this debate as to what should be honored, what should be preserved, and then what falls into. I actually like the name Legends, because I remember it used to just be called the Expanded Universe.
Exactly. And I'm with you. I love that the choice of the term Legends, I think, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I think the choice of the term Legends actually came from either Disney or Lucasfilm to like officially say, like, because Lucas used to always consider it to be an expanded universe. He considered it to be a multiverse, and he's like, that's part of a different Star Wars universe, and it's not my Star Wars universe. You can believe it all, enjoy it all you want, but it's not part of my main, like, Earth 616 or whatever. Like, it's not part of mine. It's part of those other ones. And I'm with you. I like the term because it lends itself really nicely to whenever they choose to make something canon, pulled out of Legends or what have you, and make a tidbit canon, or take it as inspiration for something they're doing in the new canon, it means that they can still tap into some of those stories in other books or comics or movies or TV shows by referencing them literally as legends, things that someone heard on the wind. But you don't have to ever, like, you can kind of pseudo make it canon by having someone generally mention it in the timeline someplace, but the characters and things never have to actually come in for them to still get some sort of tribute in the story, which I really do like. Actually, there is a it's in the house. I'm reading the new Dr. Aphra book, and it's I didn't understand actually what the book was supposed to be. It's not these Dr. Aphra books, but like the actual print book. I didn't know it was a thing. And it's basically a collection of I forget which of these this run was, but it's a run where she first meets Darth Vader, and he hires her to basically do some things for her. It was released as comic books, but someone decided, I don't know who the author, who it was, but decided that, hey, why don't we take that story and put it into an actual print book? And so it's a full regular print book that is read as like Aphra, what she says, Vader, what he says. It's really, or Aphra, parentheses, narrator, Aphra speaking out loud. It's really interesting. And for the first like 2 pages, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to read this. This is it's strange without the tiles and stuff of a comic book. But after a couple pages, it just went so fast because her dialogue moves so quick. But in it, I bring this up because in it, she mentioned several things that are, have been legends. I'm trying to think of them right now. But she's also mentioned in her books, the references to like the Nihil from the High Republic area. And their path engines and how they fly through hyperspace in very strange ways. So she's like, actually, they're using her character to like actually almost break down the fourth wall of both Legends and bridging the gap of the High Republic era too. It's been kind of interesting to watch that. And I know a little off topic here a bit, but I like what the idea of Legends can actually mean to what they want to turn into canon, because it just gives you a will. I know we're going to talk more about that, but yeah, I really like the intentional use of Legends. I feel like EU or Extended Universe almost unintentionally diminishes what that content was.
Yep. It's funny. You brought up Lucas's issues with the extended. I always think it's funny the fights that creators have with their content after they release it. And Tolkien had this problem. George Lucas has this problem. Gene Roddenberry has this problem. It's gonna be. I hope Rich is here because there's gonna be a lot of Star Trek references. Because right now Star Trek's in an open civil war right over its canon. I mean, right now there are nerd fights like never before. It is worthy of a Ken Burns documentary. the type of nerd fighting happening over on the Star Trek side. So I gotta say this. It's like, I think that what happens is that a creator builds something, and I get that. Like you build something and then it's yours. and it's funny because Star Wars immediately had comic books that came out after it. And Alan Dean Foster wrote a sequel to Star Wars called Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and it's great. It introduces things like kyber crystals, which again don't become a part of canon until Rogue One. It is a really cool thing that people did between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. I think it was Marvel. That actually had their run of comics. That first they made Star Wars the movie into a comic book, and then they started doing all of this expanded universe stuff, and they even went back in time to Obi-Wan, and they showed Obi-Wan being a kind of like an intergalactic policeman having to solve a murder on what's like the equivalent of like
film noir sort of thing.
Yes, it was. It was like Murder on the Orient Express, except it was like Murder on the Corellian Express or something. I swear it was something like that. Wild. And oh yeah, and so I just keep thinking about stuff like that because I think for a long time there wasn't enough Star Wars around that people really like fought over it. Like people were so happy to be getting any type of Star Wars because all we had were the 3 movies for a little while. And so then it was like, even Kenner, is it Kenner? That's the toy maker. Yes. They started doing a toy line on the Clone Wars, even though they didn't know anything about it. And they thought, oh, we'll do a toy line on the Clone Wars. And everybody was trying to add to the Star Wars mythos because there were only the 3 movies. And it was like, what else could we do with this character? I mean, then you get things like Caravan of Courage and all this other stuff. But we were so hungry for it. I mean, I watched Caravan of Courage when I was a kid and I was like, this is great. And it's terrible. And, but my point is that we were so hungry for it. Now there's like a deluge of Star Wars. And that's kind of like what Star Trek's facing. Star Trek's got 5 shows running at the same time right now. Star Wars has a number of new series that are coming out, new movies that have come out, new characters that have come out, multiple time series and new novels, and they're taking things from non-canon properties and bringing it, like Thrawn, bringing it into canon, like or taking things from other properties like Cad Bane and bringing that into live action. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think that's why we're here, which is how to balance that, because Star Wars is on the verge of what could be like what's happening with Star Trek right now, which is a mess. And about what's going to happen with Lord of the Rings. You already see the divisions already happening with Lord of the Rings, which is, hey, what's this happening with the Second Age? Why does Narsil not look the same? Why does it have to be different? And canon becomes this thing that is a line in the sand that's just as religious as any other type of belief system, mm-hmm. which is this is the true cross. This is the one and only gospel, and you either believe in it or you're a heretic. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think you really hit on something with this topic.
Thank you. I mean, cool. That's all I needed for tonight. Thanks, everybody. I'm good. I feel great about that. Yeah, it's fascinating because I see a lot of the chatter on various social platforms. Like you know this. Everyone who usually watches this knows, or often watches this, knows that I'm big into using TikTok. I'm not big on TikTok. I did just cross 400 followers, which made me super happy. And I actually, side note, for all the sort of chaff that does exist or that gets attention in the Star Wars fandom, for that loud minority that kind of clouds people's judgment to like, oh, people in Star Wars fandom must be super toxic. It's a loud minority, not majority. It's a very loud, tiny minority. They just happen to be really gross sometimes. Those people.
I agree with that.
Yeah, but it's a minority by far. And for the most part, the people, the creators that I follow or tend to interact with the most, are great. They're fantastic to talk to. And the reason I mention this is we talk often or put out videos often about, like I put out a lot of videos about the High Republic because that's really my jam right now. But I put out a lot of videos too about and talking or replying to people about things that happened in Legends, and there's lots of
Yep.
conversations in there. And oftentimes, like one that's actually going on in a thread that's happening on one of my videos right now is all about how Rey ended up having a yellow lightsaber or amber, whatever color lightsaber it was at the end of Rise of Skywalker. And I said it's like a chosen color. She chose who she is, and it reflects the person she is. And there's a lot of conversation happening back and forth about how did Mace Windu
Jedi Guardians?
Yeah, Jedi Guardians versus Protectors or Defenders. No.
Yeah.
Whatever the other one was, and blue and green. What did that make Mace Windu? That we see in the High Republic that they're now introducing like so many different. I mean, Ahsoka ends up having white lightsabers because after she heals a couple of kyber crystals in the Ahsoka novel, they end up producing a white blade afterwards.
Yeah.
And so there's like a lot of differences just on the lightsaber side that have come out that are bringing in, like, tap into Legends things, but have bringing it into a whole new dimension. And it's interesting because most fans I have seen are really excited. Using that one example, they're really excited about the idea of this is a new direction for Star Wars. It's seemingly innocuous if you're just looking at it on the surface, but it's actually a really big deal because in the stories, especially if you read the High Republic, what you notice is that even modifying your hilt and having a cross guard on your hilt or doing other things with your lightsaber, the hilt itself, the handle, the cross guard, the pommel, were totally acceptable. And actually, like, many people did it. It was no problem. It was thought totally fine. You're welcome to it, because at that point they thought of the lightsabers as largely a ceremonial thing. Like, even dueling with lightsabers in the High Republic was thought as mostly ceremonial. These are rarely ever pulled out in any sort of actually defensive mode. And from a dueling perspective, they're like, we just do this for like exhibition purposes. We don't. Nobody duels with no fights actually occur lightsaber to lightsaber anymore, because it's thought that the Sith are gone. And it's so interesting because even in that they customize their hilts. They can have different lightsaber colors, all these different colors. And I find it fascinating because that's one of those places where, for the most part, I don't see a lot of shade thrown at the idea of having all these modified hilts, lightsaber colors, all these things, because it really reflects, to me, even if it's subconscious to many people, it reflects the nature of a Jedi being able to choose their own path through the Force. And even if it's not choosing, realizing that they have their own way of interacting with the Force, and that is embraced throughout all the Jedi Order at that time period. I don't see a lot of shade thrown at that. And so it's always interesting to me, the dichotomy between situations like that where people by and large are like, no, that's really cool, I like it. And some other detail like, you brought in Cad Bane, how dare you? Or, why didn't you, I don't know, why do the Bothans look different between this and this? That's completely ridiculous. How that you couldn't possibly do that because whatever the reasons happen to be. I find that fascinating. I find the places that people will tend to gravitate toward, I'm holding this dear, I don't care so much about this. I find that fascinating. I'm really curious what causes any person to hold one thing dear and the other thing just be like, yeah, whatever, it's not a big deal to me.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember, I think it's like, sometimes I think it's two things. It's being protective of a thing that you feel like you own, right? Like, hey, like, I own this, so I deserve to be able to say what's true and what's not. And then I also think it's like it's like the stories we tell ourselves or the stories that we come upon that then become like our truth. I remember when I was a reporter, I had a really great mentor, and it was my very first editor, and she told me the failing of all reporters is the first thing you hear is the truth. And then everything that you hear after that is the thing that is trying to disprove the first story that you heard. And that's like the hardest thing about being a reporter is remembering that the first story that you heard isn't necessarily the truth. And because Star Wars had all this content that came up, like I remember, and I'm sure I can find the Reddit thread where I got into it with someone on lightsaber colors. And someone was like, no. This person can't have a red lightsaber because red lightsabers are only utilized by the Sith. And I was like, well, let me tell you about some things that I know. And then I even started talking about video games, where there were several video games where you would have some characters members of the Jedi Council. There's a famous PlayStation game, Jedi Power Battles, where like tons of different Jedi have different colors. Like Mace Windu has a blue lightsaber because at the time of Phantom Menace, that was the color of the lightsaber that they decided for him. And Plo Koon has a yellow lightsaber, for example. Like all of these, every Jedi's got a different lightsaber color in that game, and it's a lot of fun. And I always bring that up as that is a licensed game from Lucasfilm and Lucas Games, and that was a part of the release of the Phantom Menace, and then it's this back and forth, and you'll even hear like backstage like video of George Lucas saying, well, the good guys have green and blue, and the bad guys have red, and then you look at someone like Exar Kun, who's got a double-bladed blue lightsaber, and also falls to the dark side. And then it's this kind of like back and forth where a lot of these rules aren't as hard and fast as I think some people want them to be, but because they came upon a thing or a story where they're like, no, that rule is hard and fast, that's what it is. It's and again, like I'll use another fandom example. It's the I can use two. It's the Klingon head ridges. In the 1960s, Klingons didn't have head ridges at all. They didn't look like they do now. And then in 1979, when the motion picture came out, they realized, hey, we have money. We can actually like give these guys makeup now and like make them look cool. And they said, yeah, let's do that. Let's like give them a different look. And you know how many fans freaked out about that? Not many, because everybody was like, yeah, of course they look different. It's a movie, so they're going to look different. But then likewise, they reinvented the look of the Klingons in Discovery, and that was like a bridge too far. It's like there are certain things where it's like, I think fans can have a certain amount of tolerance for, okay, so this seems fast and loose. Hyperdrive, how does hyperdrive work? Well, it just works, so it's fast and loose. How does the Force work? It just works. It's fast and loose. But then once there starts to become rules, people, I think there's a section of fandom that loves rules, and that's everywhere. Aragorn can't enter into Minas Tirith until Faramir invites him in, because otherwise he would break the prophecies. And it's like, yeah, well, in the movies they didn't have time to do that, so we gotta like let that one go. Warp drive, you can't go faster than warp 10, everybody. Well, guess what? They did that. And you can't do, but the warp scale's got to be redefined. No, warp drive isn't hyperdrive isn't built of any fuel. Guess what? There's coaxium now. And I think that it's like because we venerate this stuff so much, I think that there's a segment of the fan base that needs there to be consistency and certain rules. And there are certain things that I'm like that. Like I don't like the redesign of just the random redesign of something just to redesign it.
Right. I agree with you on that one.
But I'm okay where it's like, hey, we're gonna make this look better. Like, yeah, the lightsaber fights in Episode 1 are a lot different than they are in the original Star Wars. But I think that's okay. Mm-hmm. And that's because Alec Guinness, they weren't going to put him on wires and say, okay, let's lift you up off the ground, dude. I think that there's stuff that we as fans have to give and take, and that's where it is the balancing of canon and legends, because it's like some of that stuff we kind of just got to let go and say that was cool that we knew that then. Oh yeah, Yoda killed a bunch of dark side users, and that's why the cave is powerful with the dark side. I remember reading that on the back of an action figure thing, that it was like, oh yeah. Or I remember reading about Sullust and the dark side that's connected to Sullust there, and all these things. And it's like, yeah, but that was like on the back of an action figure card. Like, I gotta let some of that go.
Yeah.
Not Mara Jade. Mara Jade's legit. Everything else I'm willing to let go.
And Jackson. I mean,
yes.
He's sticking around. If Kevin Scott has anything to do with it, he's sticking around forever. I'm totally with you. And actually, I love when we've talked about this before, when changes are made for the purposes of for narrative purposes. Like there's a real reason for it. Like
there's a reason for it.
In the case of lightsaber battles, like I've heard this a few times from people in various ways. So I'll paraphrase the broad swath that I've heard, but it's lightsaber battles in like the Phantom Menace were really good. Or if you look at the Clone Wars or what have you, the Clone Wars animation, like obviously it's an animated show. So like when I hear people get really like, oh, look at the lightsaber battles. Why couldn't you have done this in movies? Because it's a cartoon, and like you can do that in animated. You can't really do that in real life, at least not at length. Like you can hire Ray Park all day long to recreate, to do a particular scene, but even a human being is going to can only do the wire thing, and it's only going to look so good on TV, on like live action for so long. But the narrative thread that I love about this particular one is, I've heard people say, well, that's ridiculous. They should have changed it because look, it's clearly different when Luke's growing up, and like his lightsaber fights were very poor and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but see, there's actually something really interesting about that, which is if you think of the connection to the Force that we're led to believe, and Mace and Yoda even say that, I believe our ability to use the Force has diminished. It's a good indication that, well, that didn't just happen today. That must have been led up to over time, which if you think about it, it's like, okay, well, probably some length of time, something has been clouding them or diminishing them. In this case, it's implied that would be Sidious, and that Plagueis and what they're doing is like their grand plan was diminishing them. And so what you end up having is once they're all gone, then Luke has to live or learn basically on his own. Yes, Yoda helps him to a degree, and yes, Obi-Wan does to a degree, but it's a very tiny degree. So a lot of his learning is from reading Jedi text and trying to understand how to do these forms. And so the fact that he's shown is not as skilled as you would hope he would be, and even same thing for Vader. Like he's in a big robotic suit. The dude's not very nimble. I think that actually really lends to a great narrative thread, which is the ability for the Jedi specifically to wield the Force and then duel is basically non-existent because there haven't been any Jedi until Luke, really. And so he's having to learn from scratch, and he doesn't know any better. So same thing when we see Rey fight, and I've even heard people say like, well, Kylo Ren was a completely trained Sith, and how was she able to defeat him in a duel when he's a completely trained Sith? I'm like, well, calm down. Not completely trained Sith. Like, let's just be clear here. Like, Snoke was guiding him into the dark side, but it wasn't like he was, Sidious when he was younger, literally dueling with, Maul or whatever and teaching him martial skills. That's not what Snoke was doing. He was manipulating him to get him to use the dark side more. Kylo, Ben had learned an amount of skill from Luke, who had learned it from books and only can convey what he could convey. So to me, it's not too far of a thing to reason that, Rey and him battling, if he's exhausted and he's overly worked up, they're not going to compete. But I think in those narrative threads, it actually works really nicely. I like the story that it tells. To your point, getting back to your point, because I kind of just went down this rabbit hole. Point, I started hearing the term. I'd never heard it before. Or I've heard the term before, but not in this context of a Star Wars lore master. Like I've heard the term lore master before in various forms, but I'd never heard it related to Star Wars before. It makes total sense, but I just hadn't heard it. And there's a couple people on TikTok that I follow that kind of call themselves lore masters. They're like, but it's just an unofficial thing because I just know a lot of data points. And I kind of wonder if there's a segment of the fandom, of any fandom, that wants to be recognized as like a lore master. Yes. Just because that's an accomplishment they want in their life, and this is a thing they can attach themselves to, and they want to feel like, I'm a person who has all this knowledge, which goes back to something you said earlier, which is I don't think you said the word, but you touched on it, which is there's a level of emotion, an emotional attachment that people who feel that way have about very particular things in Star Wars or Star Trek or insert fandom here, that when that is altered, it feels like a personal hit on their own, on how they identify as a person. It's an emotional hit on how they feel or identify themselves as a human being. And that then makes them react to it, which is, wait, hold on. You can't change that because they wouldn't say it out loud, but you're affecting my identity. You're not allowed to do that because you're affecting my identity when you do that.
You hit it right on the head, man. It's a lot of people take this as like a personal identity. And then I get it. Like it's these things mean a lot to me too. I'm a big Star Wars fan. I mean, obviously we do a weekly podcast on it. And I
like a continuous stack of comics on my desk.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, I paid for this stuff. You know, I just like, I mean, obviously, like, I'm a really big fan, but I also, I have seen these arguments break out, and it's at times the way that someone might talk about being jilted, the way it's like a betrayal. It's like, oh my gosh, this series has betrayed me. And it's like, yeah, you can't like pin all of yourself in this, man. Like, I mean, I remember the when the prequels came out, and people felt you hear the things like, you know, this is just ruined my childhood. It ruined my childhood. And I think that also comes in when like Legends was created, when they started to do the sequel trilogy, and people who were like, no, I really care about Jason and Janai Solo. Like I get that. Like I get that there were people that like loved those stories. And I remember the, you know, Mara Jade and Luke's story, and gosh, that's like an amazing. The Heir to the Empire is like an amazing book. You know, I would have loved to have seen those be the sequel trilogy. I wouldn't have had a problem with that. But I was also okay with what they ultimately did, and tried to do kind of a new version, a new story. But I can see how for some people that was just a bridge too far,
right? Because
a lot of fandoms are, this is what I have. This is what I know. And it's kind of like someone coming in and undoing scientific theory, or undoing a religious theory, or undoing something that it's just as like pertinent and important to their personal as professional life. And to say, you know, oh, actually, I'm going to change this. Those changes seem and feel arbitrary, because in sometimes they are. And so then the reaction is no, you can't change this because I own it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I see that fight that happens. And it's funny because it's, and I realize rewatching some of these podcasts, I say it's funny quite a bit. It's an issue that like the way that I always dealt with it was, I like what I like, and I'm going to leave behind the stuff that I don't. Like, I like the Getty Tartakovsky Clone Wars, the little thing, the little cartoons. I loved that. And that kind of fits inside of canon. It doesn't, but it kind of fits there enough. And I'm like, yeah, like I'm all behind that. I really enjoyed that. Those cartoons meant a lot. They told a really great story, but I'm not throwing a fit because the Clone War animated series came out and kind of rewrote a little bit of that and created characters like Ahsoka. I mean, I even came around on Ahsoka. At first I was like, I don't know if I like this character. And then I was like, oh, I love Ahsoka. And so I think you just have to kind of be willing to see these stories for what they are, which is somewhat changeable. Yeah, I think people have a hard time with that, because especially when it's something that it feels like it's so concrete. And I always think of the Klingon forehead ridges. I would have loved to have met the fan that said, no, I want the stupid makeup from the 60s. Why aren't they in that? And it's like, no, it's an opportunity to change.
I want to come back to that Klingon ridges thing, because I actually have a very serious question for you about that. But I'll get back to it in a second. It's interesting because I'm thinking about what was the thought I just had? Sorry, I was thinking about as you were talking about like Mara Jade and these other characters, Force Awakens. Force Awakens is a great example. There was so much shade that was thrown at that movie by that vocal minority, and until we started doing this show, I don't think I ever really thought about it in the way that I'm going to say right now, which is a realization for some people, and I actually had to I chose to comment on somebody's video and do actually my own like stitched video of it on TikTok about how they were very frustrated about how those movies were made, and Rey was the main character, and lots of things that were very gross to talk about because like they're misogynistic and things like that. But putting that aside for a moment, because that's its own brand of
its own big toxic box. Yeah, it's like, hey, we're gonna put all that stuff over there.
Yeah, we're just gonna push that right here off of stage left. It's gonna go over here. Or actually, from everyone's perspective, it'd be over here. We'll push that off stage left. That's actually my right.
That way. Yeah.
What I replied back to this person is I love the idea of Legends, and I love the idea of bringing, if not an individual, a specific character by name into a new property, bringing what their character represented in either the book or the comic or whatever it was. Like, what was the narrative purpose of a particular character in comparison to other characters in that particular work? What was their purpose there? Forget their name, forget what they looked like and what race they were. It doesn't matter. What was the narrative purpose of that character? And the reason I brought that up to this person was, it's the reason I actually really love Rey as a character. I do wish they had not we've talked about this, gone down the path of the whole Palpatine thing, but we'll get back to that another time. I love the character of Rey because what it represented was not a character and not even narrative, the narrative of, or furthering the Star Wars ethos overall. What it represented to me is, here is a way to bring in an audience into Star Wars that has never been involved in Star Wars before. They've never seen it. They've never watched it. They've heard about it from their parents. They don't really know much about it. Maybe they caught a couple movies here and there as kids because their mom and dad, like us, made their kids watch it, but they're not into it. And then they watch this, hopefully, and go, oh, well, what's this? That's kind of interesting. This is something different. And it brings in a whole new group of people who resonate with stories, a different set of stories, because they've grown up in a different time period, and the world around them is different than what you and I grew up with in the 80s and 90s, because generations are different. Like, that's how the world works. And so, creating these new movies with different protagonists and antagonists who are almost gray in their own right. Like, Rey isn't just purely good when we see her in the beginning, and I don't mean she's bad, but she's not just good for the sake of good. And when we meet Kylo Ren, aka Ben Skywalker, he's not just purely bad. Like, it's obvious from the beginning the guy is being manipulated. Like, right away when you meet him, he is being manipulated by somebody else. That wasn't clear for a lot of the villains that we saw in previous parts of Star Wars. And so I love that because it gives an opportunity to interact with or connect with a whole other group of people who view things differently, have had different experiences of this new younger age group. And I love that. And I think you hit it right on the head that people are like, no, I own this thing. And it's like, okay, you're allowed to. You are allowed to love the thing that you love. You maybe let go a little bit, just like gear down, big shifter. But, okay, I get it. But also recognize if you love that thing so much, probably time to admit to yourself, but these new things, they weren't made for you. Like, you are allowed to enjoy them because they're there. Go enjoy. But they weren't made with you in mind. They were made with a different group of people in mind that they're trying to attract in. Because if you continue to just make, as it says up there, if you were continuing to just make Legends stuff that came out in the 80s and 90s, you're not going to go very far. Because all of us, we're going to age out. Like, over the next 20, 30 years, our ages, we continue to get older, and younger people just keep coming into the world, and they're not going to understand what any of that was, because they can't go back to 76 and 77 and feel the feels that those people felt when it first came out and go through what you and I went through in the 80s and 90s. You can't go back to that. You have to start wherever you start. So you have to make new and fresh properties for people and create new narrative threads for people that resonate with them, because it cannot just stay the same. No thing will ever get better or improve and evolve if it stays the same. That is the opposite. That is the opposite of evolution. Evolution is ongoing change, hopefully good, positive change. Otherwise, you're stagnant. Fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Like, in no stories, even Lord of the Rings has gone through its own change.
Ages.
It has. The letters, Christopher Tolkien, and the untold stories, and all these other things. It has evolved over time and continues to evolve. And I think what people, let's talk about Lord of the Rings for a second. I think what a lot of people have missed, that's a classic example. Tolkien created those stories. The impetus he had for even starting writing this is first to write a children's book. Not really for kids. He just wanted to write this book. But then his whole reason for creating these things was to create a mythology for England, for the British people,
Yes,
because
that's right.
he said outside of Arthurian legend, England, Great Britain does not have a proper mythology. And he, as a linguist, he wanted to set out to create a proper mythology that the English people could potentially grab onto. But mythology evolves. A linguist would know that. A historian would know that. A mythologian like our friend Joanna would know that. Like, mythologies evolve because our understanding of those characters essentially changes over time. And it did even for the people in antiquity. And I think a lot of people who have attached themselves so heavily to parts of Star Wars that they knew and loved have either missed that, weren't taught that, or if they did, they forgot about that because they want to hold so tightly onto a thing. And that, I know, that makes this topic really interesting for me because, I don't know, it just makes it really interesting. I'm really curious to see what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I think that I think generations have to give way. I remember actually something really funny, which was when episode 1 came out. I remember a common theme is for the 18 to 45 set, which was spending all the money going to episode 1, slept outside, to get the tickets. It was a disappointment. And for the 8 to 18 crowd, the 8 to 10, or the 8 to 15 crowd, it was like wildly successful. Like, they loved it. And Jar Jar was a problematic character, but yet they little kids loved Jar Jar. Little kids enjoyed Anakin, and I remember thinking, I wonder if this is how it felt, because when I watched Return of the Jedi, which was my favorite movie growing up, and of course I hated Empire because it was so, to me, scary, and Yoda was very scary to me. He was also Gremlin-like. I loved the Ewoks. And I'm sure that there was some 30-year-old person in a theater in 1983 that was like, why are these tiny teddy bears running around? And 5-year-old Ryan was like, this is the greatest thing ever. More Ewoks, please. Give it. Yeah, I like this. And now I grow up, and I'm growing up. And I've recognized that, oh yeah, the Ewoks is kind of like a silly thing, but it made sense at the time, and it really resonated with me, and I was the audience. And then I think of my own kids, especially my oldest daughter, who was a huge Star Wars fan when she was a little kid. Loved, and all we had was the prequels and the original trilogy. And then I introduced to her. We went and saw The Force Awakens, and I think, gosh, when The Force Awakens came out, it was 2015. She was 8, and that was so big for her. She was Rey that Halloween. It came out in December, and even the following Halloween, she was Rey. I remember how hard it was to find a Rey action figure. That character made a huge difference for my daughter. And I was able to also enjoy Star Wars in a way that I had never thought I would be able to, which was not just through seeing the same characters I had seen and introducing them to my daughter, and all the legend stuff and all that stuff, but all this new stuff, all this stuff that was written for her, watching it through her eyes, watching her be excited about that character, asking me, can we go to Disneyland? Because they have this thing at Disneyland where you can meet Rey. And it was like, yeah, we can do that. And then suddenly I was transported back. I guess it's because I was never so rigid in why I liked it. It wasn't the rules that I liked, it was the themes that I liked. And so every time I watch Star Wars, it transports me back to when I was a kid. And so that's why I don't need it to follow certain rules for me to do that. There was another thing though that you brought up, and I kind of made me think of something else, which was you talked about the willingness to have the pliable mind about all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, and I really mean this because I think it's hilarious. And by the way, I see Rich has joined us. Hey, Rich.
Hey, buddy.
You missed tons of Star Trek references, man. And so Jeff, like, I grew up reading comic books, and comic books were famous for changing and rechanging their mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think probably the only consistent thing universally is that Uncle Ben dies and stays dead. But I mean, it's like, how many times does Professor Xavier die? How many times does Wolverine die? How many times does someone lose their powers and then get them back in some really weird way? How many times does a character's backstory get fully rewritten and you just have to get on board with it? Like no joke, like Wolverine's original introduction in Giant Size X-Men has been retconned in a later story that was, that was an implanted memory that Xavier put. Like comic books are sacrilegious and heretics to themselves. Mm-hmm. And so because I grew up with that, I guess I kind of never believed so much in this stuff to think, it's got to be hard and fast. Like, I was annoyed when things were just changed just to change it. Like when someone randomly got some type of crazy power, like Angel, I remember getting like crazy powers, or like they did weird stuff with Superman in the 90s that I didn't like, because they just like ran out of narrative stories. And so they just like invented crap. Like I hate random crap. But what I don't, again, with like the Klingons, we're just going to redesign the Klingons. We're going to reimagine the Klingons. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. But then I look at someone like Ronald D. Moore and what he did with Battlestar Galactica and reimagining that and actually making it this like amazingly powerful story from its source material, which is honestly crap. And so, yeah, I guess what I mean is that it's something to consume, but I don't know if it's who you are.
Right.
And I think that that's where we kind of mistake one thing for another.
Yeah, it's interesting you say all that. I until high school, middle school, I wasn't big into comic books. I don't know why, but I don't think I even realized it was a thing I could get into. And it wasn't something my parents were taking me to comic book stores. Neither of my parents were geeks in the sense of what we are, for anything really. And so I don't think I really understood what it was. And as a result, it wasn't even until high school when I was in Boy Scouts that someone in my troop mentioned the idea of like these Star Wars books. I'm like, wait, there's Star Wars books? I didn't know that was a thing. And the first season, it's actually on my shelf back here. One of the first series I ever read of actual books in Star Wars was the Jedi Academy trilogy. And that's where I realized, oh my God, there's like all this other stuff. But what's so fascinating is I didn't actually read Heir to the Empire until probably 6-7 years ago. I didn't know about it. I didn't even know how you would find out about Star Wars books. Because I didn't go to libraries. I didn't go to comic book stores. So I was like, if someone told me there's a Star Wars book I should read, I'm like, wow, there's another Star Wars book? I didn't know there was like a whole chunk of them you could go get. Someone mentioned one, I could go get it. And so every time I did read one, I would read it, and it was like I was like an archaeologist. I was just discovering some new information about a character that I had no idea about. I'm like, wow, that's really awesome. Here's another book. That's really awesome. Here's another book, and that's really awesome. Like that's how it always landed with me. And so when I got older and I got back into Star Wars again later on, and I started hearing some of these things like, well, you changed this detail. I'm like, oh wait, those conflicted with each other? I'm like, I don't know. They were just really cool stories. And they made me love Star Wars even more. Yeah, if there's one semantic piece and there are a handful that were changed between two, I'm like, okay. Like I was literally not paying attention to the semantics. I was reading the book to get to go through a story narrative and understand, like, I couldn't use those words at the time, but I now know, like, I was just reading because I was like, I slept till 4 a.m. to get through this, not to make marks of like, oh, that person has this widget and the Millennium Falcon had the landing gear in this way this time, but not that way. I'm like, oh, that was a thing you thought about? Cool. Okay. All right. I never even considered it before. I mean, comics probably would have been different if I was into it because of the visual nature of the comics. You could actually see a detail that they would describe that might visually look different in another property, and they would become blatantly obvious. And there's no way to hide that in like a description that one person reads one way and one person reads a different way. When you see it visually different in two places, okay, making one character like Plo Koon be, the character that he is, and then maybe make him human the next time, that would be like whoa, hold on, wait, that doesn't actually make sense. But I never experienced it, so I think it even hit me harder when I would come across people who held on to these things so strongly that I'm like, really, wow, that's how you thought about it. I mean, cool, like if that's your jam, right on, but I seriously never considered it in any of these ways at all. Like I was completely oblivious to that layer of detail. I just enjoy these stories. They were just so much fun that always felt super positive to me. So when I would hear the fandom get upset or frustrated about this mix up here, I'd be like, really? Huh. Okay. Like, I guess that's a thing.
Yeah, I it's funny because I remember it's the same thing with like again, to use Battlestar Galactica, which I can't think of something that has a better like divergence between its canons. It's like what its source material is and what ultimately came out of the reimagining by Ronald D. Moore. And by the way, if anybody's out there that hasn't watched this, it's a powerful series. But I remember that they had changed the character of Starbuck to a woman from the original series of Battlestar Galactica, and there was outcry about that. Oh, why? Oh, they're just randomly changing her to a woman, and it's like, no, Ronald D. Moore is like a really like good storyteller. He's doing this for stories, and I guess that's the thing where it's like, I completely understand outrage when stuff is changed for no reason, and maybe it's either lazy writing or it's bad writing, which is we don't really have a story, so we're just gonna like Rise of Skywalker it. And so it's like, sorry guys, we're just gonna do random stuff. But
Space horses,
and that happens
like space horses riding on the side of a Star Destroyer.
Exactly. Like, and by the way, like that's a cool, that's again, like, I know how writers' rooms work. So I'm sure someone was like, there was a whiteboard and someone was like, ideas, pitches. And someone went, I don't know, like horses, like they're writing space horses. And they're like, yes, more of that. Where are they writing the space horses? And so then that was like, okay, put that in the script. And so that's like, that happens a lot now because the churn of how to get some of this stuff out is so fast. So I understand there's legitimate criticism on some of this stuff. But some of this other stuff where it's like, no, this was already established. I read this in a book once back in 1993. It's like, that's the stuff where it's like, okay, you got to let that go. That's going to have to be over here. You're going to have to let that go. The other stuff where it's like, we're just inventing stuff for random things, I get it. We're just going to contradict things for no reason, I get it. I understand the anger behind that because that's sloppy, and I hate sloppiness. See season 2 of Picard. There's so much bad stuff that's coming out because they're just trying to shove stuff out as fast as possible.
Yeah.
But I think that Star Wars can avoid that, not by trying to preserve what came before it, maybe in a novel, maybe on the back of a Kenner action figure. Like I have my Boba Fett action figure here, and it talks about his background, which is obviously not the background that we had in episode 2. Mm-hmm. But if there's a good story, there's nothing like a great story that will wash away that type of anger, that will actually diminish that type. You're always going to have some toxic fans that complain about it. But I think if you start with the story first, like if you have a compelling story, people will forgive it. So much so that people will start to hope that the thing that they know is going to happen doesn't happen. You look at Titanic. How many times people watch that movie and think, man, I really hope the boat doesn't hit the iceberg this time. I watch The Lord of the Rings, and every time I think, man, I hope Boromir makes it. Spoilers for Lord of the Rings. It's sad to see, but it's a compelling story. And so I think a lot of this balance, what to keep in canon, what to keep in Legends, what to cross over,
Right.
I think it starts with the story. The Thrawn, I'm hoping they're not just pulling Thrawn out of Legends and into canon because of name recognition and because it'll be cool.
Well,
I hope there's a strong story.
I will. So you probably haven't read the books. I will be the first person to say that when I came across Thrawn in Heir to the Empire, I was like, I had been hearing about that character's name forever. I didn't know anything about him, and the book was great. Like the trilogy was great. And it concluded, and there was a conclusion. And then when they revamped and said we're coming out with a new Thrawn series, they're literally right here on my shelf. They are fantastic. Like they are at this point. Of all the Star Wars books I have, and I love the High Republic stuff. I can reread these Thrawn books probably every other day and would not get bored of them. The way that that Timothy Zahn technically wrote them, or the way he wrote the technique and the detail in which he put in there grabs you. Like you want to just learn more about Thrawn constantly. It has made me to the point of like when I see anybody mention Thrawn anywhere on social media, I'm like, I want to know more about what they call the chaos, which is all these other civilizations and empires and things that exist in the chaos, like this unknown space where the Chiss ascendancy is. Like, I want to know about this. Like, there's clearly so much there. Like, I'm almost like, forget the rest of the galaxy. Like, High Republic and move over there because the way that he has told these stories, like, Thrawn is not just the character we saw in the Heir of the Empire. Like, he did a fantastic job in that series, but man, I watched this. I read these books. I'm like, this is fantastic writing. Amazing, amazing writing. But something you touched on
with the story.
It does. And something you touched on a minute ago is I would never expect, and I think it's unreasonable to expect, a Deborah Cho, Bryce Dallas Howard, Robert Rodriguez, anybody, any author, director, to go back and say, cool, in order to direct this episode of The Mandalorian, I need you to read every Legends book that was ever put out, and then come back, we'll have a little quick conversation, and then you're going to go ahead and direct your movie for two reasons. One, I'm not going to use the S word because I won't do that, but that's bonkers. That is completely bananas. Yeah. Why would you do that? But second, in a more practical or pragmatic way of thinking about this is when you make somebody do something like that, not that they would ever do because there's too many books and it's completely unreasonable, but if you make someone do that, what you are forcing into them is conscious bias for all the stories that came before. What you've just done is taken a director or a writer who comes into this with some kind of perspective and then injects their own story idea and what they want into it, that you can double check facts and things or details later on if you want to, but you bring someone who's bringing this whole new interesting story into this canon or this idea, this storytelling matrix that we're working on. And you're making them have to bring in the baggage of things that have been done before. And the purpose of bringing in these new directors who have never directed Star Wars things before is to bring in fresh stories and new ways of viewing these characters. The problem, I don't think a lot of the type of fan that is honing in on that like, this is a personal attack, why are you doing this? It's like, I get it, but what you also need to let go a little bit is we need these newer people to come in with some fresh perspective to tell these stories in a different way. That's how we get movies like Rogue One. Like, that movie was so amazing because the director and the writers that they had were not somebody who came out of all necessarily all the Legends books and all that type of stuff. They came with a whole new and fresh perspective on how the situation played out. And you end up with a movie like that you're like pretty universally loved as a Star Wars movie. Like, it's an amazing film. Just in its own right, it's an amazing film. And that, I think, is what gets missed a lot, is it's not letting go of the past for the sake of letting go of the past. It's recognizing the past exists, doing a new thing. Go back and double check a couple things. Like, if you're blatantly saying the Death Star didn't look like a circle, it looked more like a triangle. Well, yeah, maybe you want to go double check a couple things a little bit. It looks like the diamond or the whatever the shape is from the Mortis story arc from the Clone Wars. Yeah, that's not what the Death Star looked like. Don't do that. Like, that's not. Millennium Falcon was a big Corellian freighter or Mon Calamari freighter. Well, no, it wasn't. It's a recognizable thing. Don't tune that. But outside of that stuff, let them be creative with this so that we can try to get a different sense of the story that they're trying to tell that you haven't seen before. And maybe it'll blow your mind. Maybe it won't. But try not to let those little semantics about a widget on the wall, or people have told me that my tattoos are, yeah, that's cool and all, but that's the version of Arabesh you got isn't actually canon, so you're wrong. And I'm like, someone actually said that to me on Instagram when I posted pictures of my tattoos, and I'm like, I'm just not going to respond to this. I'm like, I didn't do it for you, first off, but like, who cares? Like, it doesn't actually matter at all.
Oh, and I mean, I also think too, like, it's like, come on, I don't know. I guess it's because I've been a part of fandoms that always have like their levels of toxicity, and it's like people that I remember when they had the new Star Trek movies come out that were also shot by J.J. Abrams, or at least the first two movies were, and one of the first things that someone brought up was, well, Chris Pine has blue eyes and William Shatner's got like brownish eyes, and how, even in an alternate universe, how does Kirk have a different set of eyes? And I remember thinking, why are you spending so much time looking at Chris Pine's eyes and not watching this darn movie? Like, just watch the movie.
Like, I think it's more about you than it does about the movie. And
it's like,
that's okay, but I think you just
there
may
were
have
people
discovered
that
something
were
about yourself.
furious about this. Like, I can't believe Kirk's got blue eyes now. And all I kept thinking was like, really? Like, didn't you watch the rest of that movie? Like, I was really upset that they, spoilers for that movie, they destroyed Vulcan, which to me was like, that's such a huge thing to do. It's consequence. But again, they had a story that they wanted to tell, and they told that story, and we can debate the merits of that. But I think you're always going to have the people that are like, the kid that plays the young Harrison Ford doesn't look enough like Harrison Ford for me to believe that he's Han Solo. It's like, or you can just get on board and put that aside. If you got problems with Solo, which honestly I do, like I think I could make pretty decent criticisms of that movie, and I can tell where they struggled in their production. Yeah, like that's a different thing. But to nitpick on things that make no sense, it's like, why are you fighting for this? Where are you escalating to? Like, what is the end game in your rant and complaint on how something isn't exactly the way that it should have been? And I always think of, like, and I know that people will talk about this, the comic book guy from Simpsons, where it's like,
yes.
Actually, and it's like, there's actually a hilarious show called Actually. And it's a lot of people doing just like that, and that's funny. Like, if you want to do it for laughs, like, I'm all on board with that. Actually, the Aenar are the people that live in the northern part of Andoria, and they are not technically Andorians. Yeah, like, I love that kind of stuff. Like break off your nerd knowledge. Like, let's do that. But when it's like preventing you from liking a thing, like, that's insane to me. Like, I've just never understood that. When you're like, because there's no stories that stay the same over time. Oh, it's like, here's a fun one. So many of that.
And this isn't even a story-based example of this, but I think this is a really fun one. Let's go to any particular person and say, like, if I told you let's say you're a car lover, here is trying to think of a good example. Here's like a Ferrari from like the early 1970s, pristine, beautiful, well taken care of. Like, it's just in great condition, and you love it. You'll love the way that car looks. It's awesome. You would drive that car all day long. Fast forward, and someone comes up to you and says, here's this brand new Ferrari, I'm going to give it to you. You're going to tell me that the fact that it doesn't quite look the same as the car that looked like 40 years ago or 50 years ago, it's evolved over time, it's different. Like, well, this widget is here, and this is not how they would evolve it. Cool, so you don't want the car now? Really, you're going to say, oh, no, I mean, I still want the Ferrari. Oh, okay, because I thought the placement of the side view mirrors and the shaping of the body was just a bridge too far for you. So you don't want the thing then now, right? Well, no, I still want the thing. It's like, okay. So to your point, it's like, what my coach, actually, I love this. It's a very psychologically heavy tool, and I absolutely love it. It's been very helpful lately for me. I just generally call it Ofnir because I love Norse mythology, and that's another name for Odin. But it's OFNR: observe, feeling, need, request. You need to get from what you're observing to a request, to an ask at the end.
Yes.
And if you can get to that point, then you can do something with that information. If
Yes,
what you're doing is just simply saying, here's a thing and I don't like a thing and I'm venting, all you are doing by venting is making yourself live in this frustration all the time. All that is going to do is make you feel frustrated and upset all the time. You're never going to go anywhere past that. And that's not healthy for you, because the thing that's in front of you is a brand new freaking Ferrari. You don't want said Ferrari? Like, you're so torn by the semantics of a design choice that you don't want an actual thing.
I feel like there is like always. It's funny because even with cars, there's like a toxic fandom that's always like having to do this type of fight. I had a friend of mine who restored a 1966 Mustang. Beautiful.
Another car.
It was. Oh yeah, right. And I'll never forget when we were checking it out, and someone from down the street came by to also check it out with us because it was my neighbor that did it. And someone said, "Oh, well, you know that the Mustang never had that color of interior because he had used he had to special order this carpet." And all I thought is here's this amazing thing that someone did, and your first thought was, well, that carpet color isn't necessarily the period accurate. And all I thought was that's kind of I mean, again, everybody's got a bag of F's that they're walking around with, and sometimes they just got to hand them out because the bag.
Where's my bag?
that bag is heavy, and so I get that, but I think that's where, there's always someone that by the way, sports has this exact same thing, toxic fandoms around sports names, Washington football team, which is thank goodness they finally changed their name. Right. And now we can make fun of them because they're the Washington Commies. And no one thought that their colors being red and gold would not don't fit with that name. But my point about that is that name had to change. They had to pick a new name. Heck, they could have left it as the Washington football team. That would have been fine. But it's weird that there's a toxic fandom that is always going to be there, that's trying to say this is the truth because it's always been this way. And anybody that wants to fight against change is it's like saying I want to pause real life. Because you're never going to get that. You're never going to get those things. And I feel like people that are comic book fans, people that that have grown up reading comic books for years, it's a weird dichotomy of people that don't want things to change and yet have been forced to deal with change forever. That there isn't a comic book character. What if I was to talk to you about what is the thing that Superman, what is his power that he is the most famous for?
I don't know, flying?
Boom. So when Superman was originally created, he's faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive,
yes,
able to leap small buildings in a single, or tall buildings in a single bout. Mm-hmm. And that was his power, not flying. He did not fly. He jumped really high, but he didn't fly. And by the way, someone's going to probably point this out to me that I might be wrong, and I know that I'm not. And the flying thing came in later. What is Batman's one rule? No killing. And yet he killed tons of people early in the comic books. He was killing people left and right. But then when they remade the character in the Silver Age, Batman doesn't kill people. And that actually is part of kind of Batman's honor and code. And so all of these things that we hold as truth and sacred, things that are no, that this is the way that things have to be. I love the idea that Superman's uniform or costume is made from his baby blanket because it's Kryptonian, and that's why it doesn't burn up when he comes back into the atmosphere. Yeah. It's because it's made out of some super Kryptonian awesome thing.
I love how they changed the symbol to be the symbol of House.
Of L, yes.
House L. I love that. Oh my God, that is That is a fantastic, like that the houses, the idea there were honorable houses in your. I'm like, oh my god,
Krypton.
that connects to so many different like mythologies and stories that we have, like the house of this god or this like or monarchies. And like, oh my god, that resonates with a whole bunch of things. It's not just I am so narcissistic that I need to have my code name on my chest in a massive diamond shape and say, who are you? How could you not know who I am? Like, that's not what that's for.
And by the way, like sigils like that are used all the time. Like I 100% would have a house sigil right now. And what's funny is that Dune, which is set in the far future, all of these houses have sigils. All of these houses, House Atreides and House Harkonnen and all that stuff. They're all like that. And so when you see this setup, and by the way, where did that come from? Where does the giant thing on the chest come from? And I could be wrong on this, but I don't think I am. Marlon Brando's on the set of Superman the movie, and he's like, you know what would be cool is if I wore the big S on me, and everybody else has, they're all wearing they all also have that as their sigils, and that's on their chest. And so a really cool thing comes up as accident. Comes up because an actor that got paid a ton of money and really didn't want to be there anyway and wore a crazy white wig thought, you know what? I think this would be a cool thing if we did that. And that's what I mean. Like stuff that we hold that is Bible truth. Some of it is recent. Some of it is not the original story. And some of it is just invented. It's a part of like popular consciousness.
Yeah. And in the immortal words of Obi-Wan Kenobi, of course it's the truth from a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view, exactly. And so it's like if like, Luke,
all of you who focus on Star Wars that much for these, it's the truth. I'm like, just listen to Obi-Wan. He told it to you already. He told you it's all from a certain point of view. I mean,
and again, if you start with the story first. Were Luke and Leia brother and sister in Star Wars? Absolutely not. Were Luke and Leia brother and sister in Empire? Nope, they were not. Why does Luke need to have a sister suddenly? Why is that even valid? Why is that important? It's funny because my kids were asking me about this today. And I said, because Irvin Kershner wanted to put Luke in mortal danger in Empire Strikes Back. And he realized, what's the one thing that no one would believe I could do? Kill Luke Skywalker. I can't kill Luke Skywalker because he's the hero of the series. And so what did he do if he's going off to go and fight Darth Vader? How can I impart to the audience that he's actually in mortal danger? I know. I can say the two things that are the most important thing that happen right as Luke takes off. Obi-Wan says, "That boy is our last hope." And Yoda says, "No, there is another." And he doesn't say there's another Skywalker. He just says, no, there is another. And that is just to make you know that Luke could die. And that's a part of great storytelling. Again, starting with the story. Then when they realized that they'd have to button up that part of the story, it was easier to say, oh, Luke is a twin. And the other Skywalker is Leia. And oh, by the way, that's why they had that connection in Cloud City. That's why Luke reaches out after he can't reach out to Ben in the Force, because the Force doesn't care if you're family or not. He reaches out to Leia because he can see, feel, and sense Leia. And Leia has the moment where which again, one of the greatest moments in Star Wars. Carrie Fisher plays it perfectly. I know where Luke is. That's a great scene. All starts with the story, and again, we would now say, "Oh no, the Jedi twins. This is Bible truth. Luke and Leia, of course, they're brother and sister." Nope, because no one films a scene where a brother and sister make out, and that's what Irv did in Empire Strikes Back. So yeah, like it's funny the stuff that we hold on to as this has to be the truth, and then it's not.
Exactly. And just like Rich said, I had to put that because I love it. Like he put the S on his chest because it helps him keep track of his clothes at school.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
You know, like the gym t-shirts when you went to school that had your school name with the big box on it and you had to write your name and like Sharpie on it to say, "Hi, my name is at Mountain View School, Jeff," or whatever.
to this day, I still respond to Rose.
Dude, I
Yes.
couldn't. I don't know how it happened. I really don't. I mean, my last name is Bull, so like everyone just either made fun of my last name or just called me Bull because why not? And then sometime in high school, a friend of mine started calling me Jefe because he's like, "That's your name in Spanish." I'm like, "Okay, I know." I'm like, whatever. And it wasn't until like years later that I realized that's not what that means. It's something very different.
Yeah.
I'm okay with the alternative. I'm also okay with the alternative. Like, it's not offensive. It doesn't bother me. But I remember him telling me this. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. I'm like, I have a nickname now. That's all I knew. That's literally all I knew. And so all of my friends in high school called me Jefe. And I didn't. It wasn't until years later that I looked back on that and I was like, huh. I don't think you realized what you were actually calling me all the time. I'm like, that's cool. Like, I'm the boss. I'm the leader. I'm like, I felt super self-conscious, but apparently I'm the leader here. So right on.
Yeah, it's pretty like legit boss, man. That everyone's calling you chief. Oh, I like that.
Yeah. It's the truth from awesome, some point of view. That's hilarious. Oh my god.
Good
It's too funny. Well, listen, I know we are over time today. Rich, thanks for being here, man. I know it was a little bit late.
Rich.
Oh, I did forget. What did you think of? Was it the second? The second Star Trek movie, or was it the first? I think it was the second one where they actually go to Kronos and we first see the Klingons. No, not original, but the Chris Pine Star Trek movies.
Yeah.
In those, when they first go to Kronos, and I can't remember the actress's name who plays.
She plays Uhura.
Plays Uhura, and we first see the Klingons there with no hair, like without sand hair, and all that type of stuff. What'd you think of them in that? Because I actually really enjoyed that, but I did get kind of weirded out by how they sort of evolved that look into Picard. Or not Picard, into Discovery. Because they're similar, but they're also different, and it felt a little too... the best way I can describe it is in Discovery, it felt like the Yuzong Vong. That's all I could think of.
And there's a lot of other things too. So like they reimagine. It's funny how the Klingons go through this period of reimagination, but they actually kept reimagining them and tweaking them to make them, I feel like, better from 1983 to about 1999. There's all this really great Klingon lore that's built, and this is where it's like 15 years of like building. This is why I actually don't like random crap being done to an existing storyline. The Klingons move from this one-dimensional, stupid villain in the original series. They're just dummies to be beat up. To this honor-bound, samurai-like, society. They're feudal. There's all of these houses. They would rather die than lose their honor. They have all of these warrior codes. And that creates all this conflict because they live and they are wildly militaristic, and yet they have become allies with this force for peace. And so they're having to like grow and change, and even the promotion of Klingon scientists, and for example, there's all these things where it's like there's no Klingon doctors because an injured Klingon can't be a Klingon at all, and you would never want to be a burden. It's all these like crazy, really interesting stories that the Klingons end up creating. And so then the Chris Pine movies come out, and they have the new Spock and the new Uhura and new Sulu and all these people, and they changed the look of the Klingons. And they kept the forehead ridges, even though the forehead ridges in that was all like pierced.
Yes.
And then they gave him like blue eyes. Apparently they're like crazy with the blue eyes. And they gave him like blue eyes, but they still had him speak in Klingon, which I was like, that's cool, because that's like still. And I was able to kind of like let that go. Like I was like, yeah, it's fine. They still seem to be Klingons that I can recognize. Right. Like it's not so far out of the realm. Like I wasn't cool. I didn't understand like what was with the piercings, but I was like, yeah, it's fine. They look enough like that I could recognize them.
Yeah.
Whereas the other Klingons in Discovery, I could not recognize. I did not know them. I did not understand the culture that I was seeing. And because it's set in the past, as a prequel, it would have made more sense to me, like, set it like 1,000 years in the future, and then I would have been like, oh, this is apparently what the Klingons became. But because it's like set in the past, this should even in the past of the future. This should even be more of something that I can recognize because I know what the Klingons are in this time. Yeah. And so yeah, I really struggled with the with how they did that. And so yeah, I feel like that's where it's like you can have that break in canon, Jeff, to I think some of the points that you've made, which is if it's story driven, if you're changing something like we're going to give this character this attribute because it really enhances the story, we're going to make Vader Luke's father. We're going to do those things. Like, that is great. Like, do that because it enhances the story. But if you're just doing random crap, that's exactly what it appears, I think, to a viewer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're going to wind down. Pink Milk, thank you for being here. And you said you found us on TikTok. That's really awesome. Thank you. I
thank you so much.
I've posted a couple of times about it, hoping some folks would jump over and say hi. So thank you for being here. We're kind of at the tail end of the show tonight, but I still really we both appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Listen, this has been awesome. If you haven't subscribed yet, please, we'd love to have a subscribe. Ryan and I are getting together in a couple of weeks in person. Now that's a thing that we can do to start doing some planning for the future of the Kessel chat. We have a lot more content ideas we want to put together. So there's going to be some social lubricant involved and hanging out together and planning. And it'll be probably a ton of sticky notes and it'll be a lot of fun. So stay tuned. Rich, as always, it's good to have you here, buddy. Pink Milk, thank you so much for tuning in. And for the others who are here too, we appreciate you being here. Have a lovely night, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Right on. Hey, bye, everybody.
Cheers.